I'm going to backtrack a little bit here in this video and talk about how some built-in functions are not actually functions. So in the last module, I showed you a page from the official documentation from the built-in function section, which I have open over here. So it says up here in big bold letters, built-in functions. It says it again right here, and it lists all of them out. The issue I have here with the documentation is that not all of these are functions. Some of these are types. Now, if you read this sentence, it does say the Python interpreter has a number of functions and types built in that are always available. So maybe this section would have been better off as built-in functions and types, but this is just how Python has laid it out. I think the reason they probably just call them functions is that they're all callable. So we talked about constructors before, like the list constructor or the range constructor or the string constructor and so forth. Those create new instances of that type. And they look just like functions. When you call them, you wouldn't know whether they were a function or a type just based on how they are called. Let's flip back over to the notes. And I want to make sure that you know the difference between types and functions. They can sometimes be used in similar ways by calling them. And before we do that, I just want to make sure that I can show you visibly that they have a different type. So if we do the type of bool or type of int, it'll come back type, float, all of these, and we'll learn about tuples, sets, and dictionaries coming up. These are all types, just like a microwave, a computer, a lawnmower. These are all types of objects. So, but this is different than a function. So, like the sum function will come back as when we put it into the type function as a built-in function. We can change this to min or max or sorted or any of these over here, and it will be a function. So I just want to clarify a little bit over what is the difference between a type and a function. So both types and functions are callables. And I should say really the constructors, so you can create these types in a different way, but the constructors and the functions are both callable. And let's just see this again in action. So the bool constructor, if we place a parentheses like this, and we put in some number, it will convert it to a Boolean, either true or false. The sum function will take in any iterable and will sum it up. So this is just one of the iterables it takes in, which is a list, and it'll put back a number. So the constructors will always return a value of that type. So an instance of that type. Remember, so we use this word instance, just means a member of that type. Functions complete a specific task. So they don't construct new instances of a particular type. So it may be good to go back to a real world analogy here. So remember we talked about like a lawnmower factory. So that's like the type, and it constructs new lawnmowers. It can construct any kind of lawnmower, many thousands of different kinds of lawnmowers. Each one is an instance or a member of that type. Like a car factory can construct new cars, a microwave factory can construct new microwaves. So the analogy with functions here is that you could have a function that maybe counts the total number of cars, or a function that prints out a car to the screen, or a function that sorts cars, by some value, right? So that is the main difference, is that there's not these functions are not factories that construct new types. Now, some of these types have other ways to create instances or members, and that's just with these literal characters on the screen. So for instance, to create an integer, we don't need the int constructor. We can just create it with numbers like this. To create a float, we don't need the float constructor. We just need a number with a decimal place. To create a list, we don't need a list constructor. We just need square brackets and then items placed within the list, separated by a comma like this. Strings are constructed with the quotation marks and then characters in between there. So these are also instances of a particular type. I've constructed them with just the syntax that Python has provided me. So going back here to the constructors, you can think of these as, you can maybe that's where Python really puts them under this functions label in the official documentation, because they're called just like functions, even though they technically are not functions. They are constructors. So whenever you use a constructor to create a string, it's acting very much like a function. So, we put some number in here into the string constructor, it converts it to a string. So you can put many different objects in here and it'll do the same thing. So in essence, it's acting like a function, although it is creating a member of that class. Now, what you'll also note when we get further in is that we'll use these constructors, or just the names, without the parentheses to test whether a particular object is of that type. So this is not the last time you'll see the constructors. They are used somewhere else. Now for functions, we're almost always calling them. That's their main purpose. The constructors have other purposes besides calling them, and that is to check instances or check that an object is of that type. So I know this is all maybe still a little confusing. Really, as long as you know how to use them, the differences between types and functions and constructors should all become clear with just more usage of Python.